Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for folks to join. We're going to give it a couple more minutes. Hey, Mike.
Hi, folks.
Hey,
Not sure I'm going to be able to do all of this meeting, but I thought I'd come on for at least part of it. So nice to
welcome
see.
to the party.
Thank you.
Mhm. So what I'm going to do is start sharing my screen. Um, so what we need to do today is work on the charter and uh, time permitting, start looking through some of the gap analysis documents that we have. But I'd like to get the charter finished as soon as possible so we can tell the TAC that we know what we're after and that the special interest group can be approved. So what we can do in the meantime, so what I'm going to do once again is I'm going to drop the link to the document in the chat. Mike, you asked me on the JP Morgan membership. It's in the works.
Oh,
And
excellent. Let me know if there's anything I can
it's
do.
under review by our PR and legal teams because that's the way things operate.
Yeah, sure. No, if there's anything I can do to help things along, to talk to
Hmm.
anyone, just
Yeah,
shout.
totally.
Thank you.
Hmm. All right. So we will probably have more people join, but what I would like folks to start doing is going through the text and let me know if the proposed changes can be approved, and then we'll just like, hopefully we can just finish uh, doing this and move to greener pastures.
Could I have access to this, please?
Of course.
Yep, could I have access to it too?
Yeah, I just need to hit the request button,
I've
and
done that. Thank
okay,
you.
it's gonna show up in my email here, and then I click share. So Bob, you have it as of right now. Mike, just shared with you, just in the order of arrival in my mailbox. And Zheng, uh, clicked it wrong this time. All right, all 3 accesses granted. There you go. Okay. So, yeah. So let me know if changes can be accepted or if you have any issues. Let's just go paragraph by paragraph, and then we'll get into the meat of it, which is some of the definition stuff.
Yeah. So the I think the first edit with starting outside of um,
Mm-hmm.
is good. You might change outside of to beyond or yeah, that's fine. Yeah, stick with that, I think.
Any objections to the first change? Going once, going twice. Right, next one.
So the next one, you say for both. Both can only refer to two things. So you've got three things after it: regulatory, contractual, and peace of mind. So you can't have both in there.
That's it, both gone.
Sorry, just to be awkward.
Yeah, no, that's all good. We want to be
I'm always
pedantic.
doing that as well. It's like you always think of a third thing and then a fourth, then a fifth.
Yeah.
It depends on the placement of the Oxford comma, though.
Well, I don't approve of Oxford commas unless you need them. In which case, anyway. But this is now clear, and there's no. But you are quite right, Bob. I'll give you that.
Okay, so let me know if there's anything I need to change about this.
Yeah, so this says enterprise is interested in strong assurances. You then talk about requirements as the last word of that sentence. And do you mean the same thing there? And I think you probably do. Do we care? Probably not, but just see what I mean?
Well, I mean, it is a requirement for strong assurance, yes.
Yeah, okay, I think that's fair. I like it. I think you should
Okay.
stay with it.
Again, going once, going twice. All right. So that now going into the meat of it. I added a preliminary definition. So, okay. So normally, again, folks, you know, I see a number of new people on the call. Ideally, you do the homework before the meeting. You kind of read the document, you know what's in it, you comment, and then here, you know, we're not going to go through stuff that's already in black, so to say. We've already covered it. But I added a definition of workload before I go into workload identity because I felt it was important to take what Whimsy has done and restrain it a little. Just not restrain it, but constrain it a little bit. So this is why I added this bullet. So this is not specifically about trustworthy workload identity. This is us specifying the terms around what do we mean by workload, workload identity, and workload credential. No, but the thing is, we don't say around which for specific workloads because we're already saying around which.
Okay, I just wanted to. I was thinking that we should reference workloads because we don't reference workloads. It's nice to have a sort of chained definition set. Do you see what I mean?
Well, so we can say workload authorization policies.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's just just so we get capitalize the W so that we're clear that we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that fixes the question I had. Thank you.
All right, workload authorization policy. Okay, so definition of workload. So this is what I said, and this is computational computing specific, that we restrict the running instance of software executing for a specific purpose to just that part of the code and configuration of the workload is subject to remote attestation. That is the because we're not going to be talking here about any workload that's not attested.
That makes sense?
Yeah, sure. Without a hyphen, but yeah.
Why without a hyphen?
I don't know. Fine. With. Okay. So, are we okay with this change? Now, Osama, I don't see him on the call today, but he asked, what does it mean, the process VM container? And I'm like, that's not for us to say because maybe new technology will arrive where workload is, you know, an enclave or a, you know, smidget, or I don't know what it is going to be. It's an instance of software. It's subject to attestation. We're good. That's my take.
I do agree with it because even now the instance of the software need not be a VM or a container. It can be just a single process.
Be a pod. Like it could be
Yeah,
number
no,
of containers.
This is I think the correct the correct definition. I think this is strong and not too restrictive, and also it allows us to reason about things like firmware and microcode if we need to.
Yeah. All right. So I can accept this change?
I think so. I think it's nice.
Nice. All right, whimsy defined. We got that. We got the capitalized W.
Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah.
So kind of like an extension of what Mike said. So with respect to the workload, does it actually involve? So the thing is, if you're talking about like process-based attested workloads, right? Then that will be easy because it's just the actual enclave itself, the process itself. But when we are talking about, let's say, a CVM-based, like a domain-based TE.
A VM is a workload.
So
if that's your isolation boundary, so workload is your isolation boundary.
I see. Then in that case, because when I'm reading the definition, it actually gives the sense to me that this workload does not include, for example, your firmware and your bootloader, for example.
We won't say here because it says subject to attestation. If it's subject to attestation, then it's a workload. And then the first thing here is isolation, and that's under the actual workload identity definition. We talk about the properties of like how can we actually give identity to workload, and then you can't give a trustworthy identity to workload unless it's isolated, because then who knows what's in it. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to have a number of things here. Let's start with what Zhang was saying. Sorry, Zhang, is that correct, your name? Okay. So a workload, if for instance you're doing something like COCO, confidential containers, you might say that a pod can have multiple workloads within it, and each workload has its own identity. That is the way they'd think of it. And the pod could have the isolation boundary out. That could be the single unit of attestation. So that's one thing. The second thing is that you can have multiple sets of attestation, right? You could have microcode attestation and firmware and UEFI and workload and data. And so just saying that is subject to attestation doesn't necessarily help. I kind of liked it as it was because it says the workload bit without defining the workload, and you can then define the workload afterwards. So I kind of like it broad, but I'm going to have problems when we get further down as well.
So I would like to know what workload is before we get into workload identity or workload credential, because they are cascading definitions. One flows from the next.
Yeah, I agree.
Right now, to your other point, if I have a pod and I have several containers within it, if they are subject to, if they're tested together, if they're the same set of measurements subject to attestation, I would probably be okay with just keeping it that way. Now, if they're not, and this is like, again, taking all these definitions together, right? There are some supporting definitions, and then we'll go into like, no, so what is a trustworthy workload identity? Because you can have workload identity in Whimsy just fine.
So let me give you an example of what I happen to know Super Protocol's approach pretty well. So I'm just going to use them as an example, okay? So they do attestation of a trusted bootloader, basically, a trusted app loader, okay? And that allows them to basically run a CA. Okay, so you have a CA, a sub CA in each TE, and then they can load applications, workloads, and they could each have a separate identity, workload identity. I think argue, and I think that is fair because there is a chained attestation. There's a transitive trust relationship from the attested bootloader onto the other pieces. And so it's second-hand attested. It's not directly attested, but does that count? And we're going to come, when we start looking at workload identity, I'm going to raise a really big question here, which is whether confidentiality is required for something to be trustworthy, a word I hate in the first place.
So we talk about that later.
Okay, all right. But let's address the first point then, which is if I can have a workload which is not directly attested, but which has been loaded by a trustworthy component. And am I happy for that to be called a trustworthy workload? And I think
yes,
I probably am.
I would say yes. I would say yes.
Okay,
Absolutely.
all right.
Because
So which means that the workload
trust
as
is transitive.
defined,
Like, right? So
it
for
can
instance,
be, yes.
I trust your loader, and by extension, I understand that the loader is going to be loading other things. And if I chose to trust that, then so be it.
Okay, that means our workload definition is insufficient then, I think.
So we do have a way, by the way, to cover, and this is like, if you look at the structure of this document, there is a notes and clarification section that, for instance, for everyone, so we had a bunch of discussions around the elements of the trustworthy workload identity, so this section. And then there is a section down here that goes into sort of the deeper meaning of different terms and sort of the, you know, what I call it, the Talmudic interpretation of the Federalist Papers, like stuff behind the stuff. Right, that explains what exactly we mean by certain things. So we have the freedom of, you know, keeping these ones very tight and then doing additional elaboration that, while not official definition, will sort of guide our discussion down the line, which I'm perfectly happy to create, you know, that additional level of refinement. But I don't want to make the definition so onerous and
yeah, no, I agree.
minute,
I agree.
that like kind of lose the force.
I'm just trying to think whether I could explain to someone based on the current definition why the other one could be trusted, and I think I probably could.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if you feel like that explanation is an important one and might be reused, then adding content to the notes and clarifications, right?
Yeah, that's
so
probably
we can
what
say,
I want to do.
You know, here are some additional thoughts of workload. Here are some additional thoughts on workload identity. And here is a case of whatever, right? It would be nice to be able to explain that so we can go back later and say, okay, we did consider this and this is what we came to. But I would like these definitions to be very, very succinct.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think I'm okay then. If we having walked through this conversation, sorry, I sometimes the Socratic method can be useful. So hopefully that's okay.
Which again, I welcome all clarifications just down below.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So we don't lose. I don't want to lose track of these conversations. I think they're actually valuable, and like all the points you're bringing up, you know, by capturing them once, we can always go back to them, and even revise if necessary. Like ultimately, but you know, let's not lose track of good ideas. So another thing I want to bring attention to. So we say basically workload identity is basically something around which, like, why are we talking about identity? Well, you know, identity is something that exists outside of a credential. Like credential is ephemeral, but here I'm basically trying to say there is a stable construct of a workload identity, kind of an expected, you know, thing that this is really a relying party construct as far as I'm concerned. My relying party can say, you see something with that identity, however you choose to express it, you can. And why I say long-lived, that's an enterprise requirement. If your workload identity is fragile, you cannot have stable relying parties. You cannot have, like, effectively don't have deployable, manageable stack, right? What workload credential is an identity document, can be short-lived or long-lived, and it's used to represent and prove workload identity to relying party. I could equally say authenticate workload to a relying party, but I chose.
I wondered about that. I think that's fine.
I chose authenticate. Like I could replace it with authenticate. Let me just finish the thought. The reason I'm bringing attention to all of this is, and a comment on 2 right here. Usama says that the most important property is authentication, and that somehow, well, Usama feels, I believe, based on what he wrote, that authentication needs to be part of the definition. And I do not believe personally that a purpose of something needs to be part of the definition of something. Like you define something, and if it's a good definition, it'll have good purposes. But I did call out that a workload identity or workload credential, the reason we have it is it's an identity document. It represents the workload identity to a relying party.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So the word I have a question about is the word construct. It's the only time it's used in the document, and I don't know what you mean by construct. Do you mean an idea?
Concept.
Do you mean a data, a concept? Okay.
But it's a concept.
Stable.
A concept is not something around which I can play policy. Like a construct is something a little bit more concrete. That's why I use the word.
But I still don't know what it means.
So
can you give me some examples?
Well, I can tell you, for instance, like when you say identify yourself, and I will say, well, I am first name, last name, with the birth date of this, and you can look at my face, and you can look, there's a bunch of stuff about me. This is, if you know about me, then chances are it's an identity. There is it identifies me. It's one of me. That's sort of a set of things you expect to see in order to be able to expect
Okay,
me.
so that's a data set.
So my passport is not my identity. My passport is my credential. My passport expresses my identity, or the minimum set of claims by which I can be known. Perhaps we can say that workload identity is the minimum set of claims by which a workload can be uniquely identified.
Well, a set of claims, not necessarily the minimum set of claims, but a set of claims. Yes, I'd like that.
But
okay, so how about this? I'm gonna make this suggestion.
Zhang has a point. Let's see what.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yes. So basically, in my mind, like the workload identity is actually an abstract notion, right? It's an abstract entity that is associated with a particular workload, or because if you think about it, like the identity is the entity itself. It can be just a DID string. It can be an abstract notion of some property of a particular entity. And then we have the credential, which is actually the like what you said, is the
representation of that. Yeah,
exactly.
So I would say that an abstract notion is not a better at conveying anything than construct. So if I were to say rephrase it, I would say a stable set of identifiers or a set of claims that uniquely identifies a workload and around which.
I think so.
But the stable one is what I'm after here. Like workload identity, like it's it's not schizophrenic.
Yeah, the only thing about stable is that I think imagine occasions where you might have emergent properties which don't change once they have emerged, but are not available at a particular point in time.
Relying parties. So this is where the minimal comes across. Maybe, maybe my face is not a stable claim because, I get old and ugly. But it's, the reason it's used on passports because it's stable enough. And the reason your passport gets reissued every 10 years is because it's, it's not that stable.
I'm not sure that's the reason, but that's one of the reasons. Yeah, okay.
But I'm kind of like guessing, like, so for example, a DID string can also be a workload identity, right? Like some relying parties might just say that, hey, I accept this string as being your identity, provided you can prove to me that you are indeed the owner of a particular string.
Yeah.
To give an example. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, would you like to change the construct to something else like a set of claims? Or a set of identifiers?
Well, identifiers, it may not be an identifier because, again, there could be occasions where it's the ability to respond to a challenge response, for instance. So that's not a single thing, it's an ability, which does fall under claims. My claim is that I can respond appropriately to a challenge response.
If that's the case, I'll actually prefer construct because, like, you see, the ability to be able to respond to a challenge actually ties into that kind of like abstract construct or that construct, right? That entity that we are talking about.
Let's leave it. If we're not sure and construct gives us enough space, let's leave it. That's my
right. Especially workload identity is like, that's really like the rubber meets the road here. It's a workload credential. There is an identity document, which I think we broadly understand what that means. And then it represents and proves workload identity. So whatever that construct is, workload credential makes it real, makes it presentable, makes it useful.
And to this point about authentication here, I think that you can use it for other things beyond authentication, and you're quite right. And it's not just you shouldn't define solely in terms of usage. So I think this is good.
Okay, so we can change that. Now let's talk about the following comment: workload identity versus credential. Okay, so I already told him that we've done that.
So I have a problem with the word trustworthy.
Well, we are defining it.
Yeah, well, I have a problem with
Are you having a problem with the fact that we're defining it the way we're defining it? Because it's a Humpty Dumpty principle, right? It means exactly what I mean now, no more, no less. So like, okay, so I originally had it in this document and it was crude and I removed it. But the difference between trusted and trustworthy is that trusted will screw you and trustworthy won't. Right.
Okay, so let me read a quote from Dorothy Denning, 1993. Okay, which is one of my favorite quotes in this subject. Is the paradigm of treating trust as a property is inconsistent with the way trust is actually established in a world. It is not a property, but rather an assessment that is based on experience and shared through networks of people in the World Wide Market. It is a declaration made by an observer rather than a property of the observed.
Okay.
So it's not an inherent property. So as long as we're avoiding that, I may be okay. But my concern is that whenever one uses the word trustworthy, it tends to start looking like an objective truth, which I think we need to avoid.
So we are actually addressing this later in this doc, Mike. Let me explain.
Okay, good.
So when we go down to the concept of the third property and the lineage.
Yep.
Lineage, right? This is where there is a little bit. So why do we have three definitions, three parts of the definition? So, okay, let's go back. We say,
I'm really sorry not to have read this before in detail. I do apologize.
That's okay. So our first prerequisite for the workload identity to be trustworthy is isolation.
Yep.
Right. So your hosting environment is not going to, steal your secrets, not going to mess with your integrity. The second one is binding. So if your workload identity is not bound to your workload instance, then it's not trustworthy. And now there is a third one that actually hasn't existed before. And then your workload credential, you can be traced back to workload's lineage. That's part of the trustworthiness of, okay? And here in the notes and clarifications, the Talmudic section, excuse me, I'm Jewish, so that's the best I can come up with.
That's fine.
Translate
I get
into your own domain.
The glossolalia. That's fine.
Right, so here we're basically saying Bob can keep secrets and can reasonably assume to only execute a given piece of code, which is integrity. So Bob can keep secrets and has integrity. But then you don't really know if Bob's good. Like Hitler could keep secrets and, would probably act in very predictable fashion, right? But that doesn't make Hitler trustworthy just because he has integrity and confidentiality and isolation properties. And the third one is you need to basically ask around whether you like, whether you want to trust Bob or not. So
that's one way of dealing with trust. I agree. Okay.
So that's where we're addressing specifically your comment. So because we have lineage, we have an option of figuring out, do we want to trust this thing or not?
So again, the problem is that trust it to do what? And trustworthy trust is always contextual. The first corollary of my definition of trust in my book is that trust is always contextual. So when you say trustworthy, you're not saying that it's trustworthy to do what?
Authorization policies. This is captured by this. I map the claims that you provided to an authorization policy. You gave me a credential, I map that credential against the policy. Based on what you told me, you're allowed to do X. So that's why I'm saying these 6 statements, they work together to achieve exactly what you're saying.
then we have a need to actually define what a workload authorization policy would actually be.
I
Because that
think
wasn't clear to me.
that's so well known that I don't really see. I mean, we're not going to define every term of art. We know what authorization policy is. It's a mapping between a determination of the security principle and the rights of that security principle. That's an authorization policy. Now, if you want to add it, that's fine, but I think it's like it doesn't add anything that anyone on this call can define predictably. Like, okay, so here's my test for whether something needs a definition or not. Ask 10 people. If they give you 10 different answers, yeah, you need a definition. But for authorization policy, I don't think that's the case.
That's very dangerous in a Talmudic sense, just to be clear. But yeah, I get that. Right. Notoriously so. Having studied a bit of theology, well, I have a theology degree. Okay, so okay, long of workload authorization policies. Okay, I think I'm willing to go with this. I'm now going to. And unless, Zheng, you want to go any further with it, I've got another question I'm going to come up with.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I think that workload identity must have integrity controls, but I don't think it necessarily needs to have confidentiality controls.
How else are you going to protect the keys?
That's not necessarily how you provide identity. You're making huge assumptions there. And secondly, it may be that confidentiality is one of the authorization policies, but it's not necessarily the case.
Well, no, on this, wait. We have a workload. So integrity aside, we believe that needs to be done. Workload, unless it can keep a secret, it does not have a property that its credential is tightly bound to the workload instance.
Okay, so here's a counterexample. What if that workload is a homomorphic encryption workload?
That's not subject to remote attestation. It's not subject to our working group.
It could be. Why should my workload not include code which is homomorphic encryption? So I'm using TE, but within it, I'm putting a homomorphic encryption workload application.
If the code is homomorphic encryption and the code is public and you know the inputs into that code, then you can't keep a secret either.
But no. But I don't necessarily know the inputs into it. The point is that the initial loading of the thing doesn't necessarily, I think, need to be confidential. There are ways of doing it in such a way that you can create confidentiality of workload without the initial piece.
Can I suggest something? So I think what is required, the confidentiality part is actually required by the credential and not necessarily the workload. So unless we are saying that the credential must come from the workload, but otherwise, like.
So we might want to add a clarification around this. Let me give you an example. So there is a type of a workload that is of great interest to me in other domains. It's called the sealed glass proof. So with a sealed glass proof, your inputs are public, your code is public, and you assume that you pretty much all you got is integrity measurement of the code.
Yes.
You, in this case, while you are on the surface not requiring confidentiality guarantees, just isolation in order to get sealed glass proof done, you are not engaged in like a workload like this is not going to have a workload identity. It doesn't need it.
I disagree. So for example, one of the use cases that we have for TEs is actually to act as an alternate proof system for example, zero knowledge proofs. So in this case, I actually need to have a workload identity that's associated with this workload.
But then it's not going to be tightly bound to your workload instance. I can steal it because you don't have any confidentiality, so I can do whatever I want. I can just repurpose it. Like you'll communicate. You can't sign statement, right?
Oh,
so
you haven't said the word unique anywhere here.
No,
and if you care about uniqueness, you need to add it.
Uniqueness of what?
Identity. You haven't said it. If it matters, you need it.
It need not be unique. I may have several different identities on a workload, like one for authenticating to peer workloads, one to authenticating workloads to another domain.
Well, then it may be entirely appropriate for me to be able to load an identity into an existing workload if I'm authorized to do so.
We
don't need to be
talk about we don't talk about whether the identity is whether the credential is around a key that originates in the workload or given to it from the without. Like we'll have some preferences, but in order to have a credential that's suitable for authentication and authorization, it has to have a secret. And that secret needs confidentiality protection. The rest you can choose to open up. You can choose. It's a choice.
Okay, I can load as long as I trust the integrity of the application. It is possible for me as an authorized party to be able to load an identity into that workload, which should meet all of these capabilities.
You can't load an identity. You can load a credential representing an identity. Let's get a little precise. But for credential, in order to prove that credential to a relying party, you need a secret. Otherwise, you don't have binding.
I can load a secret. I can load a secret into it.
But then it
won't be a secret.
If you don't have confidentiality protection, your secret is no longer secret.
So Mark, for example, like let's say, if I use an attestation report as an authentication mechanism, then would you consider that as a confidential requirement on the workload?
Attestation report needs to be proven by something.
No, yes, there is a secret. The secret is...
it's not secret if you don't have confidentiality protection on your workload. Nothing is a secret.
No, so I have a workload. My workload is totally public. Like there's no secret.
Data and code.
Transparent.
Data
and code. It's all transparent. Now, for example, I need to have a signature that signs over the results of my computation to say that it comes from this trusted execution.
So you basically you did a quote. You did another quote. Well, in that case, you have confidentiality protection against the CPU key used to sign it.
Okay, fine. So if that is the case, then I agree that
we can have a clarification saying that you can open up confidentiality of the code inside your workload to everything except the key that used to sign the credential. We can do that. But at some point in time, some kernel needs confidentiality.
Okay, and I think I'm getting to where you are from a different direction, which is I think that as long as we don't assume that confidentiality of the code is a requirement at load time, as long as we can get there, then I'm happy.
We should probably clarify the confidentiality property. Like I believe we need to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, like, and this is again, this can go into here, and I already say that whether the code and data require confidentiality scenario specific. See, I already mentioned that for sealed glass proofs, neither code nor data need to be confidential, but for video games, code and data must have confidentiality protection. So I can basically say at a minimum, confidentiality requirement must extend to the key used to prove the workload credential to a relying party.
Can we say the mechanism used to to prove the and put maybe in brackets typically a cryptographic key. Yeah.
So
I'm very happy with that.
This is why these sections exist, is because they capture this sort of a discussion.
Yeah, no, this is good.
Keeping the definition tight.
I hope. I'm sorry if we're
no, it's all
arguing stuff
good.
that shouldn't be done,
This is exactly what we're here for, because we need to walk out of this having a consensus. So then later we can basically base the work off of it. Like we can. This is why we're taking the time. Okay, so here we talked about reference.
Sorry, just to go back up again. We got the word, the phrase running on the same hardware. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
I do. This is why I added it. So we need to be, so first we started, okay, we need to isolate from hosting environment. Then we added, we need to also be isolated from the peer workload instances. I think that's not controversial. And then I'm basically saying, there could be, I mean, do you feel that same hardware should be dropped?
I'm wondering about it. I'm not sure I feel it. I'm wondering about it. But I think, again, so what do we mean by the same hardware? Because one could say, for instance, that a CPU and a GPU on the same machine are not the same hardware.
Yeah. Maybe we should drop it then.
But there's something here that's useful, I think, because you might say within the same isolation boundary, hardware isolation boundary, because one of the conversations we had a few weeks ago was when we're talking about the granularity of identity, and we're talking about system identity, and we're talking about component identity. And component identity is kind of the lowest level, and I think we need to have a starting point from there, because you can always build system identity from separate component identities, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's the hardware isolation boundary that we probably care about.
I don't think it's a hardware isolation boundary, right? I think it's the kind of like, I would define it as a workload boundary.
Oh, yeah, that's not clear, actually. Yes, you're right.
Yes. But I like the whole like boundary idea, domain or like boundary or.
Yeah. Isolation boundary? Within the same isolation boundary, or managed by the same? Managed is a bit, no, managed is a bad word, I think, here. We've got other people on the call. We've got David and Bob and Sal and Alice. If they have anything to say, please shout.
Yeah. Whenever we do attestation, we usually don't attest multiple pieces of software running across multiple devices.
In which case, it's the attestation scope.
So perhaps we should just drop it and leave it for interpretation.
My concern is that you start going to the higher levels of identity in ways which are possibly unhelpful.
Well, we can clarify this in supporting documentation. But if we can talk about workload as something it's deployed by a particular, purpose, the hosting environment can't mess with it, its peers can't mess with it, then, whether we're testing a CPU or CPU plus GPU or something that runs on multiple machines that, that has a larger attestation scope, that's probably just clean, and it doesn't get us into unnecessary conversations. So I'm just trying to see. This is for. Okay, I'm gonna close this comment because I think it has been beaten to death. What about this one? FF. So this is a SAMA that feels authentication is a fundamental property, and I'm telling him that's already captured by other parts of definition. So I'm implying to close that as well. We already discussed that here. What about this binding? This one I don't. They're reverse proxies. They're really nasty constructs in enterprise IT, which deserve more attention.
To be taken outside and shot, yes.
We're dealing them. Oh no, unfortunately, they're a regulatory requirement. You don't take those outside.
Doesn't mean
I know they're pain in the ass. So yeah, they certainly killed token binding, like some 7 years ago. Okay, so I don't know what to say here. Like we'll probably need to leave reverse proxies to supporting documentation. The idea is, if a workload is trying to communicate its identity to a relying party, then we really know which one we're talking to, and even if it went through an intermediary.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's
Yes.
fine.
So should I
just kill that comment?
Okay.
In my humble opinion. Yeah.
Okay, so this one is a summons, and both Dan and I have been pushing back on this one. So and it will be discussed in the attestation SIG in a couple hours from now. But
which I can't make, I'm afraid. But okay.
Okay, so there is an identity crisis in TLS protocols, and I just don't believe it needs to be like what we're doing in this working group should not be TLS specific for one. And attestation
totally
SIG
agree.
should be handling that. Do you guys feel it should be kept, or should we?
So I think this is actually orthogonal to the whole workload identity part of thing, because I don't have to use ATLS to do like
correct
to authenticate a workload. Yes.
So I think I would put it slightly differently, which I think maybe not orthogonal. This may be one approach to helping solve this problem, but that does not mean that it's necessary to put it in this document. So I'd agree it should be taken out. I'm not saying it's entirely orthogonal, because there is some overlap.
Okay, so attestation SIG will handle this. Not that it's not important, it's just not here.
Yeah.
Okay, so resolved. Oh shit, I'm gonna delete that. Shit, what did I just do? I'm gonna reject. Okay, so these are anti-goals. I made a comment myself. So what we would like to know, is that we don't fragment the solution landscape. Like, it should be broadly compatible, consistent across things that we'll be doing. Again, there is what you can't have is you have to do radically different things in radically different domains, in which case
I think when you say availability of solutions, you really mean patterns here, don't you?
I really meant architecture. There are no gaps in the architecture.
Okay.
It's just that the workload identity space is naturally highly fragmented. Highly fragmented. So you have step functions, you have lambdas, you have containers, you have pods, you have multi-system workloads where you have, or just the compound workload, CPU, GPU, NIC, right? And if I need to do a round trip to my verifier and then another round trip to an IDP for every lambda that I launch, that is not going to work. That would, unless addressed, that would be a gap. Like, I can do it for all except lambdas. And then what I'm trying to say is there have to be, we need to effectively ensure consistency or availability of patterns, whatever. But the idea is that you don't leave important areas unaddressed and that cause the whole thing to not be able to get adopted. So I don't know how to phrase this better.
Also, the way you phrased it could mean opposite things here. So this could either mean gaps in solutions because such gaps cause barriers, or it could mean gaps to solutions which cause barriers. I'm being quite pedantic here, but
so inconsistency would be captured by one. And this one
Yeah,
is
no, I just mean
links.
that the language semantically can mean two things here. The second one, so I think I know what you mean, but I'm just trying to work out how to phrase this in two different areas. Gaps in the availability of. So that deals with what have I just done? That deals with one. I don't think this is a hill to die on at this point. If we want to tidy it up later, that's fine. I think it's nothing major.
To keep it as availability, or
yeah, I think
I
so.
would, or just replace availability with architecture.
Yeah, fine. I mean, try it, see if it reads any better.
Or maybe architecture of approaches. I don't know.
Approach solution designs.
I think availability would actually be
Better?
closer to the. I think availability would be closer to the kind of like the semantic meaning that we're trying to bring out here, because we want to kind of like fill in the missing pieces for all the solutions, right? Like
yeah. So okay, so I'll just close this comment and not do anything.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. Do I want that comma, Mike?
Yes.
Fine. Okay. So Osama asked you to define workload. I did. I'm going to close this comment.
Well, actually, I'm going to change to which could. There we go.
Okay. Go ahead and accept.
Okay. I can actually type letters.
All right. Well, you're at
it. Right. Yes.
Okay. So that closed because we're getting really close here. I added set of mutually trusting TEs. This is the clarification
Yeah,
section.
so this comes back to the boundary thing right here. Yeah, I think it's okay.
And we already added that in this call.
We did, which hopefully we agree with.
Yep. All right. Let's see. So this is the lineage discussion.
Hold on
Go
for
ahead.
a while. Just to on the very first point, the workload needs to execute inside a T or a set of mutually trusting Ts. So for example, I'll just give an example and then we'll see if it actually fits this. Let's say we want to use this confidential computing for MPC, multi-party computation. The workload itself, so I guess it depends on how we define the workload. If the workload itself is the MPC protocol, then actually part of the workload might not be running inside a TE, right? Because I can say that like I don't need all my MPC participants to actually be running within a TE. I need a certain percentage, a certain level of MPC participants running within a T that can be part of my protocol design. But if you are talking, if you are defining workload as, for example, the specific MPC node, then specific to the node.
It's the. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. Please finish.
Yeah. So specific to that, the MPC operator that want to run within a TE, they would have to run it within a TE. So I'm kind of like.
I could replace mutually trusting with collaborating.
Well, don't forget we've already defined workload as running instance of software, and also said that it's confidentiality and integrity protected. So that excludes specifically your point about things which are not running in a TE.
Okay, can.
Okay, so can we
I'm in two minds about this, but I think it's probably safe to put it in than not.
So what would you put?
No, I like this. I think it's great. The mutually trusting.
Yes.
You
I
wanted the
want to
mutually
keep
trusting?
that. I want to keep them mutually trusting. Yes.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So moving forward, so this is the lineage discussion, and
Yeah,
there was some question
we're very
around.
close to the end. I'm gonna have to drop. We might want to finish here anyway, but we've
Okay,
only got
well,
2 minutes
I would
left.
like to get it to a point where I can take this up to the TAC. So if we can
Okay,
use
all right. Let's see if we can quickly do it.
next few
Okay.
minutes. So there was just an explanation. So like, what's lineage? And here I explained, well, if your SVID and X59 has a serial number, and I can look the serial number up in some data store somewhere, and I can, for odd purposes, basically say, oh, this is why this credentials was issued. And, then I can make this additional trust decision. That's why I clarified it and then basically asked me to put it in the main text of the doc.
So for the lineage part, I'm actually fine with it. The only kind of like point is the provenance and lineage, but yeah, I guess it's being discussed actually.
Oh shit! I've just made an edit really far up the document, which I thought was further down. Right at the top. You may hate it, but I thought that it was consistent with what we just said.
Okay, fine. We can keep that.
Okay. I'm just
We
going
do
to
want
tidy
that
up
for
the
auditing.
language.
The thing is, the auditing is dear to my heart because I deal with regulated institution bullshit all the time.
Yeah. There you go. All right.
Okay, so can we keep this?
Which bit? The
Just the
X509.
purple. Yeah. It's just an example of what lineage might look like. That's not exhaustive.
Yeah.
We're just explaining why we're using lineage and not provenance. Oh, I need to change the text too. Okay.
As a dog owner, I'd like pedigree, but that means slightly different things again.
All right. So, and lineage, once established, can be used in many ways, auditing and assisting real-time authorization decisions. Again, this is not something we're going to, this is just
Love that.
explaining why
That's a very good example. That's excellent.
Do we want to,
and it shows it's not.
I would like to chuck all of this. These were additional properties of trustworthy identity that I don't believe need to make the cut. And this is, once we do that, I can take this up to the TAC.
I don't think any of them are strong enough to be worth trying to take at the moment. Let's not lose them, but I don't think we want them in now, do we?
I think I'd like to get rid of them because I don't think, I mean, I can keep them. Like we can say we considered, but chose not to include. That would be
let's
fine.
do that for now. Yeah, at this point. Yeah. Good work. Very nice work, Mark. Fantastic.
All right. Well, thank you.
Right, I am going to head now, I think, if that's okay.
All right.
That's the final
I will
piece,
see you guys in the attestation SIG later today. And this is now going
Not
up
me.
to the TAC for, well, not
Great
you.
work.
Going up to the TAC for final approval. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank
all
you.
right. Bye-bye.
Hello, David. Hello, David. Are you there? Hello.